Today we are going to talk about MCP servers. For those of you who don't know, MCP stands for Model Context Protocol. Now what is this Model Context Protocol? It is used to connect your LLMs, your LLM clients like Cursor, Cloud Desktop or any other LLMs which you use to some tools so that they are not isolated. So right now what you can do with LLMs is just chat with them, like go on ChatGPT, ask questions, it gives you some answers. But now you want to connect some tools also to it. For example, when you're coding on Cursor, you want your code to push on GitHub, you want to search something from Google, or take this example someone built where you can just ask Claude to create a 3D version of a 2D image using Blender MCP. Now might be the next big opportunity for anyone to make money like we had for the websites in the 2000s. So in today's video we are going to be focused on three things. What are MCP servers? What's the architecture behind them? Second thing, how to build MCP servers from scratch. Third thing is how to actually make money with MCP servers. Now starting with the first thing, to understand the architecture of MCP servers. So MCP servers you can assume are just like normal servers which you have, but the only thing which they offer, it is a protocol for communication between your LLM and your tool. Your LLM expects some request or response in a particular format. What this MCP does, it generalizes the request and response for different LLMs so that they can understand the response and they can also send a request to these MCPs. Basic setup of this MCP, if you go into the detail, it is just simply a way to actually communicate with these LLMs, and on the top it is just a server, normal server like you would build for various API calls. You can assume that a call being made to a MCP server kind of like an API call, and you get a response. So it is a basic request response. The only difference which it comes is that the request and response is standardized. The way the LLMs communicate with these servers, that is standardized. Let's see a bit of architecture of how MCPs interact. So there is your host. This host can be any of your client application, Cursor, it can be Cloud Desktop, or you give how to connect to your MCP server. Now your MCP server can be set up locally, or your MCP server can be a remote server which is being offered by someone else. Basically provide MCP server and the host will then create a connection with it. Now this connection is maintained at transport layer. So there is a fixed connection you can assume which is made between your host and your MCP server. Now whenever you ask something from your LLM, it can easily send the request to this MCP server over this connection which is maintained. Now let's come to the second part, which is how to create an MCP server from scratch. So I'll take the examples of TypeScript for now. So we basically create a TypeScript project. Dependencies, you need to add the Model Context Protocol SDK and you need to add the required dependencies for Node and TypeScript. Now in the server itself, what you need to do is import this basic server, base server implementation which is provided by this SDK, and also import these functions called tool request schema, error code, list tool request schema. I will talk about like what these functions have to do. Then you simply create a new server with version and capabilities. Then in server you set the request handler for the list tool request schema. Now this function will be used by your client, which can be Cursor or Cloud Desktop, to know that which are the MCP tools which are provided by this MCP server. Now what is a tool? A tool is basically which an MCP server provides, which the LLM can call. Now there are different things an MCP server can provide. It can provide tools, it can provide resources. So tools is basically you can assume some API call to some other tool. For example, a call to Google search, a call to GitHub. Resources on the other hand can be some data. It can be from some database, it can be from some file system, it can be anything. With this list tools request schema, you have to provide what type of tools you are creating. Let's take the example which they have given on their website also, which is calculate sum. Now in this we provide the name of the tool, we provide the description of the tool, and we provide the input schema. Now this is important. Now input schema, we define what is the type. Using this, the LLM is able to know what input it has to pass. It provides the properties of this object. For example, we need A and B. Now the LLM will be able to call this tool if it has these required A and B, and it will use to call it. Similarly, let's take an example of another tool which I built, which is Google search. Now you have to perform Google search. What you will do, again we'll add the description, and in the input schema I have just kept the query, normal string which we use to query Google. Now the next thing which we have to set is the request handler for call tool. Now the LLM is able to list the tools which are available in this MCP server. The next thing which it has to do is to be able to call these tools. Now in this call tools request schema, we define the functionality of each different type of tools which we have defined above. So for example, for the calculate sum, we will check that the request which is sent by our client is calculate sum, then it will perform whatever the work it has to do, and then finally return the response in this manner, which is the content, and the type we give the type, and the text we give the text what we have to provide. Similarly, for Google search, you will have to put your own API key, you would have to put your own ID, which you have to go to your Google developer account and get these IDs. After that, you just use this URL and put these search params. These queries will be provided by your LLM or your client, which will be calling this, and finally it will return a response. Similarly, this response also will contain things like content and type, and finally the search results text. The client and the server are connected to each other through the transport layer. Now this transport can be of two types. It can be of an HTTIO server, which as the name suggests, it can be used for standard input and output. And the other type of server which is also provided is an SSE server. SSE are basically server sent events. So for example, if you build an MCP in which you want to send some events to your LLM or your LLM client which you have on your local device or wherever, in that case you will need an SSE transport. So in this case we are using a normal HTTIO transport. By in this we are simply calling main to actually start up our server. Now this is the basic code of a MCP server which has two tools. Now let's see how LLM connects to it. Now I am seeing this in cursor. Now I'll show how to connect your cursor to this server which we just created. Now to connect cursor to this MCP server which we have created, you go to the settings in cursor. In this, go to MCP. Now I have already connected this, but I'll show you how I connected this. So basically, when you click on add new MCP server, it will open this JSON file. In that JSON file, you have to add MCP servers, and for the first one I added like this MCP server. Now you have to give the command. Now since this is a TypeScript, you have to give the command node. If this was Python, then for Python there is setup for UV. Right now this is TypeScript, so we'll give the command as node, and then we have to give the path of the server that we created. So this is the path of the server that we have created. Now as soon as you do this, what it will do is that cursor will connect to your MCP server. So right now it is enabled, I'll disable it. So right now it's not connected. So when you set it up and go do refresh, it will connect to your MCP server and you will see green here. Now sometimes you might not see green here, so in that case try restarting your cursor, then it will definitely turn green. Now let's suppose I give cursor the query to sum 3 and 4. Now since I had created a calculate sum tool, it should be able to call that calculate sum tool from the MCP server. So let's say sum of 3 and 4. So as you can see, it said that I'll calculate the sum of 3 and 4 using the calculate sum tool. So it was able to detect the calculate sum tool which I have added in this MCP server. Now I will call run tool, and it gave me the answer. The sum of 3 and 4 is 7. Now you can also see the response in this MCP tool, which is 7. Now the other tool which we created was to do Google search. Now let's give it a query to do a Google search, a particular topic. Let's say Python documentation. It found this MCP tool called Google search. Now it is asking to run this tool. Now I will do run tool. So it will call this MCP tool and it will execute the code which I had written, and it will give me the top results for it. Now this is a very basic tool, and it is a very basic command also. You can ask it to do Google search and do some other things. And as you can see, the response of this Google search MCP tool was something like this. This is how you create MCP servers. Coming to the third thing, how will you be able to earn money with this? Now since you can see that this is just code, and it does most of the times, a lot of these MCP servers are open source. I'll add the link below to some basic MCP servers which are available open source. Then how will you be able to sell this? Basically, as I talked about at the start, there are two ways. Either you can build a local server and provide it open source for the people. That is one thing. The other way is provide a hosted solution. You should be able to create an MCP server, host it, and provide that hosted solution. The second thing which you need to do is do it for complex tasks. For example, that guy did something for the Blender MCP. If you go through the Blender MCP code, it is doing a few things, tools to it, only few things which can be done. Now let's say you create a full-fledged MCP server in which you are editing a complete video, or let's say you are creating a complete thumbnail. You take an image and create a complete thumbnail with the person. In that way, like, you can create these types of MCP tools for tasks which are very tough to perform if any person has to do who doesn't know editing or who doesn't know how to create thumbnails, and that can be easily done by just a single prompt to the LLM. Then anyone will be willing to pay that tool. The only cost which you will have to bear is to host that MCP server. Adding the link for different MCP servers in the description, and also the GitHub link to this basic MCP server which I built, so you can access both. You can try to set this up and try it yourself. Let me know if you face any errors in the comments. I will really appreciate your feedback on what videos you want more and what more do you want in these kind of videos. And see you in the next one.